Hi everyone, this is Lincoln Ashley from Knitterati Designs. If you're a returning viewer, I'm so glad that you've come back. Hopefully there's something that you've been enjoying, and if you're a new viewer, you're very, very welcome. Sorry, I'm just settling myself into the chair here and trying to relax in a little. So this week, I'd like to say hello to my new Patreon supporter, Edwina. Thank you so much for opting to support me, and also to Nina, who is also a Patreon supporter. So these ladies, for those of you who don't know what Patreon is, these are both tier 3 supporters, so they get all of the knitting support that they need for $10 a month. And the numbers of tier 3 supporters are limited, so if anybody's interested in checking out Patreon, if you're enjoying what you're seeing and you want to support me a little, then you can totally check that out, and I will put the link in the description. If you can't support me through Patreon, but you would still like to support me a little, then by all means share these videos. You know, the more the merrier. The more people who see it, the better. Sorry, I should stop saying so much. You see, I kind of like to keep these podcasts unscripted to a degree, because I want it to be very fresh and honest, and you know, if I write stuff down first, it's going to be a little bit more tempered. So yeah, that's why I often end up with the M's and the so's, unfortunately. But anyhow, let's get on to what I've been working on this week. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, you will already know that I have cast on another sock. And the reason that I've done this is basically I needed something easy to work on. We've been having a few health issues with our puppy. He's about 17 months old, so he is actually a puppy. I have a tendency to refer to both of my dogs as puppies. You can hear him going upstairs there in the background. So it actually looks as though he has, I won't say a mystery illness, it's some sort of nerve-based illness, and actually working out what it is, it's going to take a lot of time and effort, and hopefully we can do something to help him. So yeah, I just needed something. He was in for x-rays on Monday, and I needed something that was nice and easy to just cast on and go round and round, because the projects that I had on the needles at the time, it just wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to be able to concentrate enough. So I cast on another sock. The yarn that I'm using, you may remember from last week, and I'm actually enjoying this a lot more than, if you recall last week, and I don't know where they've gone, but I had a finished object. I had knit a pair of socks in the pink, blue and white striped version of this West Yorkshire Spinner sock yarn. And I still have a load of it left as well, so it must be around somewhere. I shall post pictures of it later, that's what I'll do. But I have finished the socks that I showed you that I had on the needles last week. So the colourway that I'm using at the moment, I much prefer. I kind of didn't like the white that was in the other one. It seemed to be a little bit, I know it's the natural colour of the yarn, but to me it was coming across as a little bit grubby, just because it's on a sock, you know what I mean? And there's nothing worse than grubby white socks or grubby white stripes on your socks. So even though I really loved the yarn, I loved working with the yarn, the colourway I just think wasn't for me, but this I love. So as I've shown you, West Yorkshire Spinners with Blue Face Leicester, and there's the colourway, and it's a 100-gram ball, you can see there. So if you recall from last week, let's see if I can show you this here. I was having some difficulty with laddering, and because I'd lost my mojo for DPNs. So I've definitely been working on that, and you can see it's not perfect, but it's definitely better. I mean, if I pull it, obviously it's going to ladder, but I think once those are worn, you're not going to see anything. See it from the other side again. I'm pulling it because I have my finger in there, so of course it's going to look like it's lathering, but I don't think that's too bad at all. I've also changed my method of increasing just to change it up a little, try something a bit different. So on this one I've been using the bar increase, where I don't normally do demonstrations in this section, but I'll just do a quick one here. I'm actually going to be pulling out this sock because I don't like how many stitches I cast on, but I'll talk about that in a second. So the bar increase, you pick up the bar here, and then you either knit into the back or you either pick it up from front to back or from back to front, depending on which way you want it to twist. Oh, I'll just see if I can get it better. There we go. So from front to back or from back to front. And then you make sure that the yarn twists when you knit into it. I'm not going to do a full demonstration here, but that's what I mean by the bar increases. So I'm going to be... Sorry, that's what I used. So I'm going to be pulling out this sock. I'm going to frog it because nobody's foot is that shape that I'm aware of. So clearly, for the number of increases that I've done, I started off with 16 stitches, same as I do for myself, and then I decided that I might try making a sock for the enabler. Just one sock, by the way, not a whole pair, just one. Because it would be good if somebody actually wore the socks that I made. And the reason why I am knitting socks with this is so that you can see it, because I do want you to see, I know that a lot of you are sock knitters, and I want you to see how the yarn knits up as it was meant to knit up in a sock. The thing is, I would actually love to use this for a scarf. I think it would make a wonderful man's scarf, even just with the very simple slip stitch pattern. But the problem with that is, if I cast on, however many stitches to do the scarf, I won't get this nice 4-row stripe going on. So it won't work, if you see what I mean. So right now I have 60 stitches between the two needles, I think. Yeah, we'll say it's 60. And if I were to cast on... Actually, I'm looking at it now and I'm wondering, 60 stitches, it wouldn't really be wide enough for a scarf. I'd really need 100. I think, at least at this gauge, to get that denseness of fabric that I'm enjoying. Well, I'm thinking on it and I'm thinking, no, I've committed to socks now. I've committed to socks. I might try and get another skein of this and give it a go, or another ball of this, sorry, and give it a go. But yeah, the more stitches you cast on, the less thick your stripe is going to be. So let's say that stripe was only 2 rows. I mean, it's still nice, but it's not as nice, or at least I don't think it's as nice. Although I'm looking at it now and I'm wishing that I had an extra ball so that I could try both. Matching socks and scarf, that can be a new thing. So yeah, this is what one of my current projects, and like I said, I'm actually going to pull this out in a little while and start over. So instead of just having 8 stitches down here, 16 stitches, I tend to half the number when I'm dealing with socks. When I say 8 stitches, I mean 8 stitches on each needle, so it's 16 stitches. So I'll probably cast on a few more. Maybe I'll do 16 stitches on each needle, I don't know. But either way, I mean, yeah, they'll go on and yeah, they'll fit and it'll be fine, but I don't understand socks with the toe that's this shape, because I don't know anybody whose toes are that pointed, if you see what I mean. Okay, that's enough about the sock. What else have I been working on this week? Okay. I said last week I was going to finish it, and I did. So, I have got to stop saying so. I'm annoying myself because I'm saying it so often. So, anyhow, this is my cowl done with mini skeins. So if you want to go back through the videos, you'll see what I started out with, and this is what I ended up with. So I do have a fair bit of the middle colour. I have a little bit less of the purpley colour that I used on each end. that's all of the pink that I have left. Let's see what else is in here. Yeah, I should, oh, there we go. There's the plain purple that I have left. There is the grey that I have left. And I have none of the green left at all, because I used it all. Yeah, I like to use up as much of my yarn as possible. So these skeins were originally, they were supposed to be 20 grams. They were actually a little bit larger, so they were about 21 or 22 grams, which was great. And now I've done this cowl out of it. So, the dreaded, okay. When I knit this, what I had in mind was a cowl that's going to be almost like a polo neck around the neck. So it's going to come up quite high, and it's going to, I mean, because of its length, it does kind of pull a little around the neck, but it's going to keep the wind out, okay? In Ireland, we get some I'll just see if I can focus that, there we go. We do get some, I don't want to say harsh winters. I mean, compared to some of the winters you guys have, I'm sure it's not harsh at all, but, you know, it can be the wind can be fairly cutting. And when you have a cowl it hangs quite low and there's a gap between the neck and where the cowl begins, it's not much good to you, because you'll still need another scarf to wrap up around your neck. And that's why I've knit this to be so tight. So when this goes on, it is like pulling on a polo neck. It is tight going around your head when you're pulling it down. Now, I am going to turn this into a pattern. I'll be writing it up shortly. Actually, I'm going to show you some of the inside while I'm at it. But the instructions will be done in such a way that if you want to make this, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. If you want to make this a much wider cowl, you can. It'll just be a matter of deciding how many stitches you want to cast on. So each of these sections, I think it's, actually I'm not going to say how many stitches are in each section. I should try to keep something for the pattern. But yeah, you'll just cast on enough for an extra section. And there we go. So you can see the inside of it is quite neat. Try focusing again. One of these days, guys, I'm going to get a decent camera, because right now I'm filming with my phone and my phone has a cracked screen. So it's even worse for me when I'm trying to do it. Now, this is the only end that I have left to weave in. If you go back through some of my other videos, I did some techniques on how to weave in ends as you go. And that's what I've done here. So, I'm sorry, it's going to take me a while to stop saying that word. I have a couple of bits here that just need to be snipped. These are actually woven in already, so you can see how this is coming across here. See, there's actually two ends here. You can see where they've been woven in. This is actually the beginning and end of round right here. And that's all that I'm left with to weave in. Happy days, because there was no way that I would want to weave in the ends for every one of these sections otherwise. It's just not going to happen. There we have it. This is really warm. It's quite dense. And I know certainly in this hemisphere we're coming into summer and we've actually had a little mini heat wave. So I finished this in the outside in the sun. What I will say, just coming back around to some of the comments I was making from last week about dark coloured yarn and bleeding onto your hands as you're using it, even though I knit this outside and my hands were slightly clammy, I did not get any ink from this lovely dark colour on my hands at all. So I was very happy with that. I know you can see some of the white coming through, but I actually quite like that as part of the colour. I would be happy to recommend it. This was knit with Martin's Lab mini-skeins. Oh, there you go. Bought at the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. So that was, what, about 6 weeks ago? I have a special on that if you haven't already seen it and you want to know what I picked up at the Yarn Festival. You can definitely go back and watch that. That is not the Knitting and Stitching Show where I put up a podcast last week. It's the Edinburgh Yarn Festival one. So I'm very happy with how this turned out. I did get, well, I won't say I got a comment from somebody. There is another podcaster who appears to be watching this, which is great. Happy days. But for some reason, even though I've asked her to, won't give my podcast a mention, and I have actually promoted her before, so I will not be mentioning her here. She's decided that she wants to become a dyer, and she's saying, oh, you know, you can't expect a dyer, you know, if they're doing lots to have rinsed everything. Actually, yeah, I can. I mean, I responded in a comment on her video, but I mean, I've been thinking on it, and yeah, I can. Actually, if you're putting out a product, I can expect it to be right when it gets to me. So if you are a dyer and you were doing lots where you can't actually rinse your product, maybe your lots shouldn't be so large. Just saying. Another comment was that, you know, if you bought jeans, you're told to wash them first. I don't wash my jeans before I wear them. I have never had or dye from jeans come off on my hands, legs, anything else while I'm wearing it, although I understand that it can happen. It never has happened. Certainly not to the extent that I've had with some yarn where my hand has actually turned bright pink or bright green from using it. So, and also, when you buy your yarn, you don't actually expect to have to wash it before you use it. That is a huge inconvenience. It's not like taking your jeans and throwing it in the wash. For example, I don't expect to properly wash a lot of my yarn. So if I'm making a shawl, yeah, I expect to soak it. I absolutely do. I expect that there might be a small amount of bleeding, but I don't expect to have to wash dye out of it. I don't think it's a fair expectation when you buy a skein of yarn to have to bring it home and deal with the washing of it because it wasn't done properly by the dyer. Now, I am very interested in anybody who wants to comment on this video as opposed to in their own podcast and not reference me. So if you do want to comment on this video, please do. I would be very interested in hearing your take on it because right now all you're getting is my take and I'm not really getting any responses. If you would prefer, you can comment on the show notes, which go up in the Knitterati group on Ravelry. That is KNITTERATTI. Where else can you comment? I also have an Instagram and Facebook. There is actually a link to them from my YouTube page, if you take a look there. If not, have a search for Knitterati Designs or for Link Lashley, and you should find me popping up. So comment anywhere you want to. I'm really interested in anything that you might have to say on this and how you feel. Have you ever gotten yarn that has bled onto your hands as you're knitting with it? And how did you feel about that? But like I said, I used this stuff, my hands were clammy, so it would have been absolutely forgivable to have had a little bit come off on my hands as I was using it because they were damp. I mean, I was outside, it was absolutely scorching, but nothing at all. My hands were completely clean when I was finished. So there you go. And I'm aware of how many times I've said the SO word during that section. I'm really, really sorry. And there it is. I will be writing up the pattern soon enough. I actually have a little collection forming of patterns that I'm going to be releasing. There's what's left in my project bag. Okay. What else have I been working on this week? I am still working, slowly but getting there, on my cashmere sparkle scarf. And the yarn was Dye Ninja. And I'm in love with it still. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this week probably because I've gotten some other stuff cast off. And yeah, the same podcaster has made a comment on how she's, you know, I said last week or the week before that you know, I like to have new stuff to show you, so I'm not necessarily going to sit down and work on this until it's finished. And that other podcaster, the comment was that, you know, she didn't feel that she had to do that. Well, fair enough. Okay, I like to have new stuff to show you. I don't see why you have to have new stuff to show you or new stuff to talk about. So yeah, I'm not going to work on this exclusively. I would love to, but I'm not going to because, you know, I do have viewers. I do have a responsibility to bring you something that, you know, is worth sitting down and relaxing with and what have you. So yeah, I'm gonna stop giving out now. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm giving out too much. It's just when you feel like somebody is watching your podcast and making comments on it in their own podcast, and this person has specifically mentioned their Irish viewer before, their one Irish viewer, so that would be me. So I don't think that I'm paranoid. You know, you kind of feel like you're talking to a ghost because you can't really respond. If this person isn't going to be nice enough to mention me, I'm not going to mention them. Yeah, there we go. So, like I said, I've put a little bit onto this from last week, not a huge amount, but I am going to prioritise it a little bit more this week. Even though I will have new things to show you next week because that's what I do. And also, what with me being a designer and all, I can't actually just focus on one thing much as I would like to. Okay, there was one other thing that I wanted to talk about today before I get into the technical section. Even though this is ever so slightly technical, but I've been noticing a few times and on Facebook, and yeah, I end up in a lot of Facebook groups and just checking out what's going on there. People saying how they have poked holes in their fingers with the needles from pushing the needle. Okay, guys, you don't actually need... Your fingers are there to guide the needles. If you're pushing the needle like that, see how I'm doing that? Yeah, you don't need to do that. I mean, if that's your style of knitting and you want to do it, and you'll see I've just done it with this finger, I don't have to do it. I'll just try and focus this a bit better. There we go. See? If you have your stitches sufficiently close to the tip of the needle, and I know it takes a bit of practice, your fingers are just there to guide the needle. You don't actually need to poke yourself to get your stitches off. The reason why I think a lot of people do this, certainly when I'm teaching, and I see that people are doing that, it's because their stitches are all the way back here. So in order to, you see how hard that is? In order to get them off the needle, it becomes a lot harder. So what they're doing is, see that? See how hard that is? So they're pushing the needle just to get that little bit extra. Whereas if you just put your stitches up the tip of the needle, which is where they're supposed to be, it just becomes so much easier. See? No fingers needed. There we go. And the thing is, the tips of the needles, and you can see my tips here are different. I spoke about this last week, but just a quick reminder. This end of my needle is a little bit blunter than this end. They're the Addy sock needles. But yeah, the tip of the needle is a little bit narrower. So it is much, much easier for you to do things and to manipulate your stitches when you're using that slightly narrower space, because it means that, you see, when your stitch is down here, pretty much all of the space in that stitch is taken up by the needle. But when you move it down here, see if we move it down here, you see how much space you have now? See all of that space there? So if you're doing something finicky, you know, like purling through the back of the loop or something like that, which is all the way back here. There we go. You know, you kind of need a bit of extra space trying to do that while it's down here. I mean, that would just be so difficult. You're just making it harder on yourself. So I would definitely encourage you all, if you are poking yourself in the finger, give this a try. Sorry, I hit the camera there. Maybe it'll work for you. Maybe it won't. But it definitely works for me, and it doesn't matter how sharp my needles are. I am not putting holes in my fingers. I am not getting calluses on my fingers. I mean, I've been knitting now for over 30 years. There are no calluses on my fingers. See? There we go. Nothing at all. Over 30 years of knitting, and I do use sharp needles when I have them and when it suits me. But you can see the technique that I'm using there. And like I use this finger to guide the needle in, because I'm pushing it against this finger to find where the stitch is. I won't say I'm pushing against it. I'm just using it as a guide. I'm rubbing it against it almost. And there we go. Takes a little bit of practice if you're used to doing it the other way, but for me it's definitely worth it, because you can't, you can't sit down and knit for as long as you want to knit if you're poking yourself in the finger and making yourself bleed. Another option, if you are poking yourself like that, is just put a plaster on your finger. If you have something to wrap around your finger, obviously it's not going to be as sore and you're not going to get that callus necessarily. Excuse me. So, like, why would you allow your finger to get that sore? Just use a plaster. They're not that expensive. You can stick them into your notions pouch just to have them handy. You can get some really tiny, thin ones, and because you're only going to be hitting it in one spot. And there you go. Hopefully that should help. So yeah, I think that's it for this section of the podcast today. What I'm going to do in the next section is I'm actually going to rip this out and I'm going to show you how to do, I think it's Judy's magic cast on. So the cast on that I use for toe up socks. So if you're interested in that, fantastic. I'll see you in a few minutes. If you're not, thank you so much for watching this far. I really do appreciate it, and I would love to hear your comments on what I was saying, either on the dye, or if you don't mind the toes of your socks being a little bit pointy, or whatever your preference is. I definitely do want to hear from everyone. So please do feel free to comment. If you could also like and subscribe, that would really, really help me get out there and get some more viewers, which is always useful. The more support I can get, the more I can show here, if you see what I mean. So if I can get enough followers and enough popularity, then I can maybe get some new stuff to review. Certainly that's what I use the Patreon for. Sorry, I'm just so very aware every time I say or so, and I am going to work on it, guys. But yeah, like I said, you will get a link in the description for Patreon if you do want to check that out. I also have a mailing list. So if you want to sign up for that, and that will also be linked to in the description, you can. Sorry again with the M's. I'm annoying myself now at this point. So yeah, I'm going to say that that's it. I am hoping next week to meet with a tourist group. Is that what you would call them? They're a knitting group that has come over from the States, I believe. So I might have a few comments from them to share next week, and we'll see what they're interested in getting while they're over here. So I might be able to comment on that too. Anyhow, thanks a million, guys, and I'll be doing the cast on in just a minute. Hey guys, I'm back with some very curly yarn. So I've pulled out the sock that you saw just a few minutes ago, and we'll just have to pretend that this yarn is coming from a sock blank. Which is how it would be if you actually did buy a sock blank and you were knitting off it. The yarn would be slightly curly. So there you go. So, I keep using that word. It's probably worse that I keep mentioning that I keep using it, but there we go. We're going to do Judy's magic cast on. which is the cast on that I've been using for toe-up socks. I also use it for hexapuffs, for what that's worth. The way I do it is, okay, I have the yarn. I don't care which side the tail comes down on. So I have tail on one side, working yarn on the other. The yarn comes between my two index fingers? No, between my index and middle finger. So I have part of it coming down here and being grasped in between my ring and little finger. Then I have the working yarn comes over my index finger, over my thumb, and then I'm just using my middle finger to tension it here, okay? Then I have 2 needles, just my normal sock DPNs. And I like to make sure before I start that I just have a little bit of a gap between them, because if I don't, I find it difficult to get the yarn in there. Okay? So I start by going between the 2 needles, and then I twist. Okay, so you see that? I was in this position, and then I twist. So I've made a stitch on the first needle, and then I bring the yarn from my thumb. Now this is the tricky bit because the first stitch will want to come off the needle. So I've brought the yarn from my thumb up and over the top, and then I twist back. And now I have 2 stitches. Okay, I'm going to start that again. I'm going to show you from the beginning. So yarn coming down, being tensioned by my 2 fingers on the bottom, coming over my index finger, over my thumb, and okay, you can tension it however you want. I'll just use my middle finger there. All right, so in between the needles, twist. Now, yeah, you can really only twist one way because your hand will only move one way at that point. Oops, you see that happens quite a bit. So we'll just start again. You also have to remember that I'm doing this not looking directly at it, I'm looking at it through a camera, which just makes it a little bit more difficult for me. So stitch on, twist. Okay. If that keeps happening sometimes, I find it easier to make a smaller amount of space between my 2 fingers and a smaller amount of space between the 2 needles, but I do find that I need some space. So I've twisted, and then I'm placing the yarn, do that again, twist, and then the yarn that's over my thumb, I'm just placing that between the 2 needles, twist back, and now I have a stitch on each needle. Okay, so the next one to make is going to be on the bottom one, because you go from the bottom needle to the top needle to the bottom to the top. But just for convenience, I'm going to put my thumb over those to hold them there. I don't want them to move. The yarn that's coming over my index finger, I use that to make another stitch, and then twist, same as we did the first time. Then the yarn that's over my thumb makes another stitch, and twist back. Okay, so we want to do the bottom again. So yarn that's coming over my index finger comes over, twist. It's really the twist that's making the stitch, and then I need another one on the top. So yarn that's coming over my thumb goes between the needles. I'm pulling it over the top needle and twist. Okay, so I'll just do this slightly faster so you can see the rhythm. Okay, I'll try and hold the needles down here. So we see it, finger over the bottom needle, twist over the top needle, down with the thumb and twist. Okay, and then once you're getting a bit full, you can push those down. So once you have, because it's sock knitting, you want an even number on each needle, which I think I have there. Now, I am going to do something very, very bold, and you're all going to scream at me and say, no, no, Linkle, you're not supposed to do that. Now, which one is my end? you. Normally I wouldn't have such a long end. It's just for demonstration. I normally calculate it. When I say calculate it, I try it, see how far I get, and then I'll pull them out and start again to make sure that I don't waste too much yarn here. And yeah, I've just made a knot in it because I find that holding that stitch in place otherwise is a pain in the behind. If I really want to, as I'm knitting, when I come to that stitch, I can take the knot out. To be honest, I have never had a problem with it. And I know some people say they can feel it with their toe. The few times I have worn socks, I cannot feel it. So I'm disinclined to get rid of it. But yeah, you can, once you get to that stitch, you can take the knot back out. But I would definitely recommend it just when you're starting into your knitting to put it there, just so that you're not, so that you're not too bothered by it. Now, and here's the bit that really confused me. Sorry, I'm trying to get this to focus. Here's the bit that really confused me. Which needle do I start knitting off? Okay? Look at it this way. This is your first row of purl bumps and should be on the inside of whatever you're knitting. Okay? Pretend then that this is the inside of your toe and that should be going down between the needles. This is your last stitch. It's over here on your left needle, or sorry, on your top needle. They're both on the left. So you want your right side facing you. When you work in the round, you want your right side to face you, and that's the side that you start knitting off, okay? Now, the first row is always the hardest. And I'm just going to point something out here, if I can get it to focus. Silly thing. There we go. When you knit this row, and I tend to keep these stitches quite tight because I don't want a loose first row, the first needle, the stitches are twisted. So you'll want to knit them through the back loop. So going with what I said earlier, if I move these stitches to where the needle is narrower, this is my pointy end, and I just knit the first needle's worth through the back loop, like that. Okay, now I'm not going to carry on because I know that you guys probably already know how to knit. If you don't know how to knit, let me know. I can always do you a little tutorial on that. But that's basically how I do the cast on. I hope that that has been some sort of help. If it hasn't, let me know what you need to see or what you need me to do, and I'll try to do that for next week. Okay? Okay guys, so thank you so much for watching this far. I hope it hasn't been too tedious for you, and I hope that the camera hasn't been too bad and me using the SO word hasn't been too annoying. Yeah, so hopefully I'll see you again next week. Please do like and subscribe, and if you feel moved to do so, if you wanted to share a link to this video, that would be fantastic. If you don't want to, fair enough. I completely understand, I get it. And that's it. Okay, thanks guys, take care.